Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 36 of SuperSports, the review series for Gran Turismo's vehicles which are above sports cars, but not necessarily full-on supercars, and with some vehicles, some of which we've already discussed, some of which we will discuss in the future, they kind of straddle the gap between the two. Usually though, these tend to be vehicles which are between supersports and supercar. This is slightly different, because this car is a vehicle which you could make the argument is more of a traditional sports car rather than a super sports car. And as with some other controversial vehicles in my series, I can understand why you'd say that. On the surface of things, this car, which is of course the TVR Cerbera Speed Six, can seem like a normal sports car. It doesn't really look like a super sports car. It's not quite big enough or imposing enough. But I would still say that it is most definitely a super sports vehicle. And it's kind of difficult to explain why I would say that, but I definitely feel strongly about that. This car may not be an obvious choice in the class. You don't see all that many people using this car on Gran Turismo, but it's a brilliant car in its own way. It's not necessarily as powerful as it might deserve to be, but it's still very quick. Now, the car was eventually changed to a V8, and then the Speed 6 title was dropped, and it was known just as the Cerbera. We don't, though, have that version on the game. Hopefully we will in the future, and I have, of course, in the past made a special projects version of this car to allow it to replicate the Cerbera Red Rose, which is the ultimate incarnation of this vehicle. This is the version that we have on the game, though, and its stock spec is kind of bordering more on sports car territory. It has a similar kind of power output in its stock form as the actual power output of most R34 Skylines, the Aston Martin V8 Vantage of the earlier 2000s shape, and various other vehicles which aren't generally considered as super sports cars. They are more traditional sports cars, and that's fair enough. But in its tuned form, which on Gran Turismo we do have to take into account, this is way beyond any of the sports cars in the game. Consider the sports cars that are on the game, cars which are unarguably sports cars like the TT Quattro, the BMW Z4, the Honda S2000. Those are fast cars, but there is no comparison whatsoever between them and how good this TVR is. So I would quite definitely say that this is far beyond a normal sports car, therefore a super sports car. Now, the engine is a naturally aspirated 4-litre Speed 6 engine, as TVR calls it, and the car is, as many TVRs are, very, very lightweight. With the full weight loss package, it only weighs 945 kilos, making it one of the lightest cars in this series. That's a good 100 to 200 kilos lighter than pretty much any of its nearest rivals, apart from other TVRs. That's a pretty good start for a track car. What about power though? Well, it does put out less power than many of the other cars in this series, some of which are putting out over 1,000 horsepower, but that low weight and the fact that TVRs have almost a mystical kind of quality which allows them to be faster than you'd expect them to be for their power means that this car is no slouch in a straight line. Fully tuned, the engine puts out 610 horsepower, which doesn't sound like a huge amount. It also puts out just over 500 foot-pounds of torque. But you combine that with a weight which is not much more than a Le Mans car, and the horsepower per tonne is just under 650. That's impressive for its power. And that's actually better than some cars with far more power because of how much extra weight they are carrying. The PP on this car, I would say, is really good, really well placed, and that's quite a rarity on Gran Turismo for me to say that, but it sits at 577. I would say that's really good for this car. You can quite easily downgrade it to 575 with a little bit of ballast or slightly reduced power, and it's really good for that PP level. It's not necessarily the best of cars for twisty circuits, not because it's a bad handling car by any means, but because it doesn't have certain advantages that other vehicles do, such as the flat floor and various other things, and even the fact that it's not a premium car does hinder a vehicle to the most part on Gran Turismo with its cornering ability. If you think about comparing premium to non-premium vehicles, even of the same car, often the premium version will feel better around the track. If you compare the Vipers, for instance, or the Corvettes, the premium versions do generally feel better, and the fact that this isn't a premium car does hinder it a little bit. That being said, it's an incredibly quick car, and the handling is far better than you'd expect from a TVR. That's actually a common theme, I would say, for TVRs on Gran Turismo. They're actually much better track cars than people give them credit for. They're known in a similar way to other cars that I've discussed before on the channel, such as the Cobra, for being challenging to drive. And although they can be, they're actually brilliant cars if you tune them correctly, and they can absolutely blow away the competition, oftentimes with far more power, around a surprising array of tracks. And that is definitely the case with this car. Overall, the Cerbera Speed 6, I would say, is one of the more competitive TVRs in the game, because other vehicles such as even the Tuscan, to be honest, which is a great car and a premium model, is almost a little bit too playful to get the job done. It's very tail happy and it's certainly fun to drive, but there aren't many cars which it can actually beat in a racing situation. The Cerbera, on the other hand, is a much more focused vehicle. It's wider, lower, and has a lower centre of gravity, a more squat, almost supercar-esque feel to the way the car's stance is. It feels more purposeful, more of a race car. And that's undoubtedly why they chose it to morph into the Speed 12, which is essentially an evolution of the Speed 6. In terms of price, it costs just under 80,000 credits, which is fantastic value. TVRs in real life have amazing prices for how fast they are, and that is carried over to the game. As far as an overall performance car, it's excellent. The top speed is over 250 under its own power, the acceleration's great, and the price is good. So if you haven't tried the Cerbera Speed 6 before on the game, I would actually recommend trying it out. But that's it overall for this particular episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.